used to believe that my mother had eyes in the back of her head. I think my sister Sandy thought that too. And you know why we thought it? Because our Grandma Laue told us, Lenny, you better be a good girl, because if you're not, your mother has eyes in the back of her head, and she'll be able to tell. And oh, I believed my Grandma Laue whatever she said to me, because she never lied. One time I was sitting around the big round table in my Grandma Laue's kitchen in Chicago, the two-flat, the upstairs flat, and I was eating my very favorite soup, because my mother used to say, Lenny, you better mind your P's and Q's. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, just mind your P's and Q's and don't ask questions. But my Grandma Laue would make me my very favorite kind of soup in the whole wide world. It was from a Campbell's soup can, and it was alphabet soup. And my favorite bowl was a blue bowl that had a little lip around it, and it was blue willow, God bless you. And she'd make me alphabet soup, and I'd fill it up, and one day I was stirring around in the soup, I was looking for the P's and the Q's with my spoon. And every time I found a little alphabet P, I'd pull it over and put it on the edge of the plate. And then when I found a Q, I'd put it over here and over here. And my mother, she was in the front room, and she said, Lenny, what are you doing? And I thought, oh, there's my mother. She's not even in the same room, but she has eyes in the back of her head, and she can tell what I'm doing. And I said, nothing, Mother. I'm finding my P's and Q's. And so she came in and she said, what are you talking about? Finding your P's and Q's. I said, you told me that it was important for me to be a good girl and to find my P's and Q's. And she said, no, it wasn't finding your P's and Q's, it's minding your P's and Q's, and it means to be a good girl and eat your soup. So I ate my soup. And I really, really like to stay with my Grandma Laue in her flat, but I like to stay there all by myself. Now, my sister was 4 years younger, so I remember sometimes she was with me, but when I was 8, she was 4. And sometimes we were really, really silly, and we had the best time, and we'd be laughing and teasing each other, and sometimes the times were sad, like when my turtle died. And when my little tiny turtle died, my sister and I decided we needed to have a funeral, because that's what you did. Because my Grandma Laue would take us to the funeral parlor every time anybody died. So we knew it was a very important thing to do. And so Sandy and I got a little box, and we got some toilet paper, and we took our dead turtle, and we wrapped it up, and we put the lid on the box, and we went downstairs with one of Grandmother's spoons, and we sat under the lilac bush, and we dug a little grave. And we had a little graveyard there with popsicle sticks, and little crosses were all around underneath that lilac bush for all the goldfish that had died, and a lot of our goldfish died. So Sandy and I were having a lot of funerals, and so sometimes we would do that. We would have a ritual. But my favorite time was when I think my Aunt Lorraine was taking care of my sister, or maybe she'd gone someplace with my mother, and I got to stay at Grandma Laue's house all by myself. I really liked it, because it felt like being an only kid. And my Grandma Laue wasn't like a real teddy bear person. I mean, I saw you with your grandchildren over and over again. Are you chilly? Are you cold? And she took off her sweatshirt and she put it around you to be sure that you were warm, because she was a warm teddy bear kind of grandmother. My Grandmother Laue was not a warm teddy bear kind of grandmother. But I got to sleep with her in the back bedroom. There were 3 bedrooms in this upstairs flat where my grandmother lived, but there was no heat in any one of those bedrooms. And Chicago gets very, very cold in the winter, and very, very hot in the summer. And my grandmother was a very, very big lady. And she had a long nightgown and a very narrow bed. And I was a little girl, no bigger than either one of you. And I would curl up toward the wall and make room for Grandmother. And she would come in. And then if it was hot or cold, depending if it was a little sheet, if it was too hot, or it was a big warm feather bed if it was very cold. But my grandmother's body was big and warm. And she was really toasty to sleep next to. Well, one time, when I was staying with my Grandma Laue, And it was in the middle of winter, and it was cold. Not below zero, but cold enough. My grandmother would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I would not get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, because the night before, she would take a brick that she had put in the oven, and she'd pull the brick out with rags, and she'd wrap it around a towel, and she'd bring it into that bed, because I was the first guy that went to bed, and I got to move into that bed with my feet against a hot brick wrapped in towels. Did not burn my feet, but oh, it felt so good. And on a cold night, I'd pull up the feather bed, and it felt so warm. And my grandmother would come into bed, and it felt even warmer. So when she got out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, it was still dark, and the bed was cold, and the room was freezing, and I didn't want to stay there very long, but I also didn't want to get up. I didn't know if I should get up and quickly get dressed and go into the kitchen. She had a wood-burning stove in the kitchen, no central heating, and it was too flat in Chicago in the 1940s. That's what I'm talking about, the 1940s. And this story is partly very true and a little bit of fiction. Okay, there's a little stuff, and you can discuss later, like, well, did that really happen? And I can say, not exactly. And then other things will say, did that really happen? I'll say, exactly, like I remember it. Because I'm writing a story. I saw you writing a story the other day. You were a writer. You guys are writers. So one morning, guess what? At 4:30 in the morning, maybe by 5 o'clock, I woke up, wrapped up in the feather bed. The brick was icy cold, and the towel around it was cold. The brick had long since gotten cold in the middle of the night. And I woke up to the smell in the kitchen. The toasty warm kitchen with the door closed, but I could smell the smell coming underneath the door and in the cracks where the door were closed. I smelled bacon. And I woke up with my mouth watering. And I also smelled onions. And when I would go to stay with my grandmother, sometimes she'd make my very favorite supper. It was called pigs in the blankets. Sandy, remember? And it was a thin piece of beef that she put on the kitchen table. And with a towel or a board underneath it, she had a little hammer that was made out of wood called a mallet. And my grandmother was a big, strong woman. And she'd hit that meat, and she'd hit it, and hit it, and hit it, and hit it. And I said, Grandma, can I please help you hit that meat? Because that looks like really fun. She said, oh, sure, Lindy, we've got to make it really thin. So we can slice it into narrow strips, and we can flour it with salt and pepper, and we can add raw onions and bits of bacon, and roll it up, and stick toothpicks in it, and then we can cook them on that wood-burning stove, and fry them hot and add some water and simmer them all day long until Uncle Charlie, who lived with her, would come home from work. I never saw my Uncle Charlie in the morning. He was always up at dawn and out of there by the time I got out of bed. But oh, the smell of the bacon and the onions, and my mouth was watering, so I jumped out of bed really quick. And I put on my socks and my shoes and my overalls and my little sweatshirt and my shirt, and I shot it in the kitchen. And I said, Grandma, you are making pigs in the blankets today. And she said, yeah, Linny, I know it's your favorite. That's how my grandma was, a warm and toasty lady. She made the food that I loved the best. She sometimes served it with shaved carrot salad, which wasn't very good, but I had to help her shave the carrots and add some cream and add the raisins, and I had to eat some. I had to eat one bite. That's just what the rule was, you know? Okay, so this day, I said, Grandma, we're going to have pigs in blankets for supper. And she said, yes, we are, Lindy. We'll get them on the stove, and we'll simmer them real slow all day long. And then I looked over by the door, and I saw an old laundry basket piled with my Uncle Charlie's shirts, old dark shirts, and black pants, and brown pants, and dark blue pants, and peeking out of all the laundry was his long red underwear. And I said, Grandma, it was Monday, and we always wash clothes on Monday. German ladies wash clothes on Monday. I don't know if they still do. I'm a German lady. I don't wash clothes on Monday. I wash clothes every day. But my grandmother on Monday washed the clothes. And she said, put on your jacket, Linny, it's cold, and go get the Oxidol. Now, she had a little cupboard, which I think Charlene and Marilyn will remember, across catty corner from the bathroom. And it wasn't a cupboard, it was a pantry. And on the floor in the pantry with all the food was the Oxidol. So I picked it up, and my grandma got her coat on, her shawl on, because it was cold outside, and we had to go outside. And there was a great big back porch. I love that back porch because it had windows. It had the biggest windows I'd ever seen. And they were from here all the way to the very top. And then there were little locks and you could open these huge windows. And then you could, about your size, and you could kind of peek over. It was about this high. And my grandma said, be careful. Sometimes she'd hold my legs. Be careful, honey. Don't go leaning over that far. Because if you do, you could fall all the way downstairs. We're on the second floor, all the way to the concrete that surrounded the little yard. But there was my Uncle Albert sometimes shoveling snow if it was really cold. I loved to spy on my uncle. He was my grandmother's brother. Anyway, grandmother said, come on, Winnie, let's get downstairs in a hurry. So she was carrying the laundry basket. I was carrying the oxidol, which was like Tide. It was a soap powder that you used to put in the washing machine. And that was my job, to carry that downstairs to the basement. So my grandmother, my big little round grandmother, she wasn't high, but she was round. And she was carrying the laundry, and she went down to the landing, and then she went down. Oh, and the people that lived downstairs were the Blaues. We were the Laues. The Laues lived upstairs, and the Blaues lived downstairs. And then we went down some more stairs, down another landing, all the way down to the basement. And then my grandmother opened the basement door. And it was always so cold down there, and damp, and chilly, and scary. Do you remember playing down there, Sandy? It was not fun. And well, it was kind of fun because you like to be scared sometimes, but it was also kind of like, you'd tell sort of like little baby ghost stories like we told. And Uncle Charlie's office was at the far end of that, and we'd have to kind of tiptoe through that dark, dank basement. But on this morning, my grandmother, right inside the door, I was right behind her holding the oxidol, the soap. And she set down the basket, and she walked to the middle of the basement, and she pulled on the light. And there was like a cone of light that was shining over her brand new washing machine. It was a Maytag. And it was on little legs, nothing like washing machines that you guys know. There was a round metal tub about this big, and then there were 4 legs, and on the bottom of each leg there was a little roller, so that you could move the washing machine tub around to where you needed it to go, because you had to not only wash the clothes, you had to put them through a wringer. Now, a wringer, back then in the 40s, was a part of the machine that had 2 rollers. And they kind of worked like this, and there was a little lever at the other end. And when you press the lever, the rollers would go like this. And my grandmother had a big long stick. And she would have to go fishing for the clothes. And she'd have to pull a piece of clothing out, my Uncle Charlie's, his shirts or his pants or his socks. And then she'd have to wiggle the washing machine around and set it just so by 2 big tubs of hot, steaming water. And then my grandmother would feed the clothes through the wringers, and the clothes would drop into hot, steaming water to rinse the suds out. That's the whole process. And every time I came on a Monday, I got to do laundry with my grandmother. Sometimes we did whites, and sometimes we did darks. And today was dark day, dark clothes, all in the same pot. So my grandmother, she had a hose, and it was attached to faucets, and very hot water came out of the hose. And she put the hose into that tub. Okay, that was a washing machine. Then, as the hose was filling the tub with really hot water, she would take the clothes, Uncle Charlie's pants. And oh, there was a thing in the middle, a metal thing called an agitator. And it was a piece of metal that came out from the center of that big tub. And when you turned it on, it agitated, which means it moved like this. But right now it was still. And so she put in another pair of pants and a pair of Uncle Charlie's a couple dark shirts and his socks and then his long red underwear. And she wrapped the underwear around the agitator. The legs and the arms and the pants and the socks were now all in the tub. And it was filling up with hot, hot water. And she'd say, bring me the oxidol, Lenny. And I brought her the soap, and she'd sprinkle it around. Now, my grandmother was a very good cook, like your grandmothers and your mothers, but she never measured anything. And she had a philosophy. Oh, we'd say, what goes in those piggin blankets? Oh, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, some onions, some bacon, some flour, some salt, some pepper. And she didn't measure things. She didn't have cookbooks. She just sort of didn't measure. So she would just put the oxide all around, and though that was enough, and she'd put it back down over in the corner, and then she took the hose out of that big round tub, and she put the lid on, and she'd say, okay, Lenny, now you can turn it on. She had already plugged the machine, it was an electric machine, into the wall plug over the sink. Very dangerous. Where's Amy? Very dangerous. And so then she twisted it on, she turned it on, and it started to move. And the agitator inside started to wiggle and turn and twist, and the clothes started to get really clean. But there was a lot of soap in there. And the soap kind of bubbled up, and it started to ooze out over underneath the lid. And I said, Grandma, look what's happening. All the soap suds, they're coming over onto the floor. And look at the machine, it's dancing. It was like giving a dance. The agitator was dancing all around, and the soap was oozing all onto the floor. And Grandmother said, stand back, Lenny. Don't stand where it's wet on the floor, or you can become electrocuted. And I didn't know what that was, but I could tell from my grandmother's voice that it was very dangerous and scary. So I'd step way back by the oxidol, and I'd wait until my grandmother said, it's safe to come over and walk on the wet floor. And when she thought the clothes were clean, she turned it off, and the agitator was still, and then she'd move everything all around, and those rollers were right over the hot soapy tub of water, hot water, not soapy yet, but would be in a minute, and she'd say, okay, stand back, now we're going to have to rinse the clothes. Then she'd turn it on again, and she had a long stick about this long. She took off the lid, and she'd fish. She went fishing for socks. She went fishing for shirts. She went fishing for pants. And then they'd all roll flat, like little pancakes, like your grandma made this morning, flat, flat. And then the clothes would fall into this hot soapy tub. And then she'd stir it around with the stick and make sure that the suds, now that water very soon, it was very hot. And it very soon was all sudsy, and it was not very clean, and it wasn't like she got all the soap up, but that didn't bother my grandma. They were clean enough. So then she said, okay, Lenny, now it's time to feed the clothes back into the roller. And so I said, okay, Grandma. She said, get the basket. I said, okay, Grandma. And she had me put the basket right underneath where the rollers were. She twisted it around. She walked around with a stick. She turned it on again, and she went fishing once again. It took all day to do the laundry. And this is with an electric washing machine. This wasn't even by hand, like my father used to do when he was a little boy. Remembered his mother not having. This was a present from Uncle Charlie. Uncle Charlie had bought this beautiful new washing machine for my grandmother to show how much he loved her and wanted to help her with her work. And so she put all the clothes through the wringer, and I was standing over here on the other side by the basket. She said, Lenny, don't let those socks, don't let those shirts, don't let those pants fall on the floor, because if they do, we've got to wash them again. I said, okay, Grandma. And I watched that all the socks came into the basket, and all the shirts, and all the pants. And then came Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. The top came first, and the top was so long. And then the arms were flattened against the top, and then the bottoms, and then the legs, and they kept coming through the roller and coming through the roller. And I was trying to get all of the long red underwear on top of the other laundry in the basket. I said, Grandma, Uncle Charlie's long red underwear, it's grown twice as big as Uncle Charlie. And she said, don't worry, Lenny. When it's all dry, we'll fold it up and it'll shrink back to size. I said, okay, Grandma. I didn't really believe it. You should have seen Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. It seemed like it was up to that ceiling. All right, so now we had all the laundry in the basket. And then Grandma took a minute to unplug that big tub, and the water drained out into the sewer drain, and she cleaned it real quick with the hose. And then she put on her coat again, and she grabbed the laundry. And that was really heavy, because wet laundry is heavy in that basket. And she opened the door, and we went back upstairs, past the blouse, up to the lounge, up to the back porch. And she set the laundry basket in front of those great big windows. She unlatched the window, and it opened big and wide. She brought over a little wooden Coca-Cola box, and she turned it upside down, and I got to stand on it. Now, if I bent over, I mean, I could have fallen out of that window, and she had to really hold on to me because I was really hanging over, because it was my favorite job, and it was to hang up the laundry. And there was a long rope, really long rope, probably to one of those trees out there, and it was attached on the side of my grandmother's porch, right on the outside where the window opened, and there was a pulley. It was a little metal thing with a little circle that went around and around, and that rope clothesline went right through it, all the way over to Uncle Charlie's garage. And there was another pulley attached to the garage where the rope looped around. So what you did was you took a sock. We always hung the socks out first. That was a ritual. That was a tradition. You do the socks first. So Grandma organized the laundry so the socks were all on top so she could make sure they were all the pairs and one didn't get lost. And so she'd give me one of her clothespins. And my job was to hang up the laundry. And it was cold outside. It was probably freezing or below, but it was still fun, even though your fingers were numb. And you take a sock and you take it and bend it over the toe, and then you put a clothespin, and then you push the little rope, and then you'd hang up another sock, and you push the little rope, and the pulley rope was going round and round, and the socks, they kind of began to move, and it was kind of fun. And then came the pants, and so then the pants went on. She had to help me because they were really heavy, and so then I had to pull the rope a little harder. And then the pants began to kind of dance along with the socks. And then the shirts. And then came Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. She had to help me a lot. I couldn't even hardly lift the arms of Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. They were so heavy. So she helped me lift Uncle Charlie's long red underwear over the edge of that window. And she must have had 10 clothespins on the shoulders because, oh, if it fell down, we'd have to do it all over again. We'd have to wash it again. And so she said, okay, Lenny, make Uncle Charlie's long underwear. Go out over the yard. I said, okay, Grandma. So I pulled and I pulled and I pulled and I pulled. And Uncle Charlie's long red underwear began to dance along with the shirts, along with the pants, along with the socks. Oh, I was hoping Uncle Albert was watching out the window. I was hoping all the people that lived in the neighborhood were watching this dance of laundry go out over the backyard. I pulled harder and harder, and Grandma said, stop that, Lenny, stop that. That's going to come loose and it's all going to fall down and you're going to have to go and get it. We're going to have to wash it again. I said, okay, Grandma. By this time, all the laundry was out, and it was time to go inside. Now, half the day was over. Now we had other chores to do. We had to work on the dinner. We had to tidy up and clean the house. Now, my grandma didn't have central heating. What she had was an oil-burning stove at one end of the dining room, butted right up next to that table, and right into the front room. And sometimes when I was there, I watched her open up kind of a big can in the bag, and she twisted it open and she poured in some oil, and then she closed it up, and the front part of the stove was so neat because it had a glass window, and I could sit down there and I could watch the flames coming up from the middle of that burner, and it kind of made me kind of dizzy. It kind of made me kind of, whoa, mesmerized me. It was kind of like hypnotic, just watching those flames. And we did some chores in the house, and it just got to be, oh, the day was just zipping by. And then Grandma said, oh my goodness, she said, we've got to bring in the laundry. She said, even if it's frozen, what we'll do is we'll bring in the laundry, and even if it's frozen stiff, we'll hang it all about. We'll hang it over chairs, and we'll hang it over the little rollaway bed, and we'll hang it over, and it'll dry out, and then it'll be all right, and we fold it up. I said, okay, Grandma. She said, put on your jacket, Lenny, we gotta go get the laundry. So I said, okay, Grandma. Well, it was really, really, really cold. And I didn't really want to do that. The fun part had been making all the underwear dance. Now the hard part came bringing it in. It was half frozen. And so I said, okay, Grandma. So I pulled the rope the other way, and it came back in, and Uncle Charlie's long red underwear were frozen, not exactly stiff, but not exactly frozen solid, but they were stiff. And so she had to help me, and there was ice there was ice that had formed under each one of the clothespins. And she had to yank them off because I wasn't even strong enough. They were frozen. And she put the clothespin in a basket and she lifted up Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. And she said, okay, Lenny, I was this high, and Uncle Charlie's long red underwear seemed this high. And she said, take Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. I'll get the rest of the laundry. You go inside and you fold it. You bend it. It wasn't frozen solid. You bend it over a chair in front of that oil-burning stove in the dining room. And it'll melt. And it'll get damp. And then it will dry. And when it's dry, you lay it out on the floor, you fold it up, and you put it in Uncle Charlie's bottom drawer. I said, okay, Grandma. I said, but first look at Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. Look what I can do with it. And it was like stiff enough that I could kind of dance with it. And I was kind of dancing with Uncle Charlie's long red underwear there on the porch. And she said, Lenny, what are you doing? I said, look, Grandma, I can dance with Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. She said, Lenny, go put that on the chair by the oil-burning stove so it will dry. I said, okay, Grandma. Now I went into the kitchen, and the kitchen was really nice and toasty warm, because there was that wood-burning stove, and she had put little tiny pieces of wood in it, heated the whole kitchen, and there was a big round table and big chairs around it, and I thought to myself, I think it's warmer in the kitchen than it is in the dining room. I'm going to put Uncle Charlie's long red underwear on one of these kitchen chairs. And so I whacked him on the seat, and I sat him down. And I whacked him on the knees, and he was sitting there. And I bent his arms, and there was Uncle Charlie, sitting at the table. It kind of looked like Uncle Charlie, sitting around the table in his long red underwear. And I was just so proud of myself, and my grandmother came in with the other basket of things that had needed to be drying all around. She said, Lenny, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, well, Grandma, the kitchen's warmer than the dining room, and I thought we could put Uncle Charlie around the kitchen table and we could have a tea party. This was not the grandmother that had tea parties. That was my other grandmother, the grandmother not from Germany but from France, with a lot of Welsh blood. She was the one with whom you had tea parties. This Grandma Laue didn't have time for tea parties. She was too busy. But she said, oh, look what time it is. It's like 3 o'clock. Uncle Charlie's going to be home in 2 hours, and we haven't even had lunch. You must be starving. So she put the kettle on the back of that stove, and it started to simmer and get hot, and she made some tea, and she brought out some of her cookies, and there was Uncle Charlie, still half frozen, and I could sit next to him and pretend I was feeding him cookies and tea until he melted enough to sort of just fall over. And she said, okay, Lenny, now we've had your tea party. Now take Uncle Charlie's long red underwear and put them where I told you in the first place, around the oil-burning stove in the dining room. I said, okay, Grandma. Okay, Grandma. So I did. I got the chair, I put it backwards in front of that window with those wonderful flames that were toasty warm, and I toasted Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. First I did the back, then I did the front, then I did the legs, then I did the shoulders, then I did the arms. It was like toasting marshmallows, just like we did the other day. And finally, he got dry. And so I laid him out when he was all dry, and I folded him just like Grandma told me, the arms over, the middle folded over, and the legs bent, and the top over, and it was all dry and all clean, and it was about this big, and it had shrunk somewhat, but I still think it was too long, much too big for Uncle Charlie. And I put it in his bottom drawer in his little bedroom. He had a cold bedroom too. It was not heated. The 3 bedrooms were not heated. And no sooner had I tucked the underwear in the drawer than I heard my Uncle Charlie's feet coming up the front stairs. I said, Grandma, Uncle Charlie's home. She said, oh, that's fine. Lenny, did you get the underwear all dried? I said, yes, I was already in his drawer. She said, well, the rest of this stuff will just have to dry overnight. I said, okay, Grandma. She said, I'm setting the table. It's almost time to eat. I said, okay, Grandma. And Uncle Charlie came inside. And I said, Uncle Charlie. He said, oh, Lenny Lump Lump. Call me Lenny Lump Lump. My name is Lynn. Lenny Lump Lump. And he pet me and he said, I forgot you were here today. Did you help Grandma do the laundry? I said, oh, Uncle Charlie, I did. I helped her with the laundry, and I hung out your long red underwear, and I made them dance over the yard, and then I brought them in with Grandma, and they were frozen. I danced with them on the porch, and then I folded them up, and they're in your drawer, and we heated them right up here. He said, you what, you what, you what? You danced with my long red underwear? I said, I did, and we even had a tea party with them around the kitchen table until you melted. And he said, what? And he said, I said, no, that's okay, Grandma. Uncle Charlie, they're already clean and they're folded up in your drawer, just like Grandma wanted. And so Uncle Charlie said, Lenny, come over here a minute. He said, go over to the Victrola. There was an old-timey Victrola with a big round top like this, and it had a big handle like this, and you very carefully, I wasn't allowed to touch it without permission, and you could open the top, and then you put on his favorite, the waltzes, Strauss waltzes, and you put the record on, and then you crank it up, and then you took the needle, and you put it very carefully at the very edge of the record, and then you move this little tiny silver thing, and it would go round and round, and pretty soon there was music coming out. He said, okay, a Strauss waltz. Let me come over here, come over here. I said, okay, Uncle Charlie. He said, put one of your feet on one of my shoes. I said, okay, Uncle Charlie. Put your other foot on the other one. I said, okay, Uncle Charlie. He said, now, I'm going to hold you around your waist, and I'm going to hold your arm, and when I move my foot, you move your foot, and we are going to dance to the music. That is a waltz. And listen to the counting. It goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I said, Grandma! Grandma, come and look! Grandma was already standing right there in the door to the kitchen with her hands on her waist, with her apron still on. Uncle Charlie knelt down and he whispered something in my ear. I jumped off his feet and I ran over and I stood by the edge of the wall and watched. And Uncle Charlie went over to Grandma and he grabbed her by the waist and he grabbed her arm. And they went waltzing, waltzing, all around the front room and the dining room, around the table, until Grandma said, enough of that, Charles, enough of that. The dinner's going to get cold. Enough. I haven't danced in years since your father died. Years and years and years before. I never knew my grandfather. And Uncle Charlie just smiled. And very soon we were all sitting around the table in the kitchen, just the three of us, and eating pigs in the blankets, and I had to take one bite of carrot raisin salad. And I said, Grandma, can the next time when I come, please, may I please also help you with the laundry if you're doing darks? And can we do everything that we did today the next time I come, if it's on a Monday? And she said, we'll see. And then I said, Uncle Charlie, if we wash your long red underwear, would you please, well, even if we don't, would you please dance with me again to the music from the Victrola? And he said, maybe. Guess what I knew? I knew that when parents say, we'll see, or maybe, it almost always means yes. And that's the end of that story. Uncle Charlie's long red underwear. And that's based on Uncle's Where We Lived, on 2116 Wellington. It's still there, and every time Robert and I go to Chicago, which is not often because we really don't like the traffic, but if there's a little extra time, I'll say, please, Robert, can we just please make a little detour and go to see the house? And Sandra does the same thing. And the last time we were there, a young couple had bought the upstairs flat, and we walked down the little narrow gangway between the two houses and went in the back, and this makes Robert very nervous. He said, God, most of the others say, I'll wait in the car. And then I walk down and I look up, and they've enclosed that great big porch, and they've just made a room out of it now. It's not big windows that open at all. But this young couple still lives, a young couple lives there, and someone even had bought the basement and was making an apartment down in the basement where my Uncle Charlie, where I did the laundry with my grandmother, and there was a little office of my Uncle Charlie. And that person, I was able to say, I used to come here and stay with my grandmother in the 40s, in the early 40s. And as Sandy said, they never just say, well, come on in and look around. They just say, oh, that's interesting. How nice. How nice that you've come, and the house is still here, and we certainly do like it. We certainly are happy to be here, and someday I wish they would ask us in, but they never do, and that's all right. But that the house is still standing, 2116 Wellington, after all those years when my great-grandfather built it. And we all have memories. Charlene has memories, Marilyn Sue has memories, Sandy has memories of that place with our Grandma Laue. You have memories of the table being laden with food till it was almost like bending. Food was really, really important. So that's